When I moved to Carter's Hollow, the first thing everyone told me was, stay away from the house at the end of Elm Lane. It was always said with a nervous laugh, like they wanted to pretend it wasn't a big deal. But their tone betrayed them. They were scared. They called it the Whispering House. People talked about hearing strange voices around it at night. Some even claimed the house knew your name. I didn't believe any of it. Small towns always had their ghost stories, and I wasn't about to buy into this one. But every time I walked past that house with its sagging roof and cracked windows, something about it called to me. On a cold autumn evening, curiosity won. I waited until dusk, grabbed my flashlight, and headed for the house. By the time I reached the property, the sun had disappeared and shadows stretched across the street. The house loomed ahead, every broken plank of wood bathed in an eerie half-light. As I stepped onto the overgrown path leading to the porch, a faint sound stopped me in my tracks. It was soft, almost imperceptible, like a distant hum or someone whispering under their breath. The closer I got, the clearer it became. The whispers sounded layered, as though several people were speaking at once. I couldn't make out any words, but I could feel them, almost like they were vibrating in my chest. The porch groaned under my weight, and when I reached the door, I hesitated. It looked like no one had touched it in decades, splintered wood and rusted nails. But when I pushed, the door creaked open with ease, revealing the dark void of the house's interior. Inside, the air was thick and cold. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but I could make out pieces of overturned furniture and fragments of shattered glass glinting on the floor. Faint voices circled me, coming from all directions. They weren't angry or screaming, just insistent, like they were trying to get me to understand something. "Hello?" My voice came out shaky, the words swallowed by the heavy silence that followed. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but something drew me toward the staircase. It was a pull I couldn't explain, as though my body was moving on its own. The wooden steps creaked with every movement, the air growing colder as I climbed. At the top, a long hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors. But one stood slightly ajar at the very end, faint light spilling into the corridor. The whispers grew louder, urging me forward. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open. Inside was a child's bedroom, frozen in time. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper, and a small bed sat neatly tucked in the corner. A rocking chair faced the window, moving ever so slightly, though there was no wind. And then I saw her. A little girl in a pale nightgown stood near the bed, her back to me. Her hair was long and dark, cascading down her small shoulders. The bed, her back to me. Her hair was long and dark, cascading down her small shoulders. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, but the whispers seemed to come from her, pouring out of her like an unseen force. Are you okay?" I stammered. The girl tilted her head slightly, as if she had heard me. My heart pounded as she slowly began to turn. Her face came into view, but something was horribly wrong. Her eyes were empty pits of blackness, deep and endless, and her mouth twisted into a wide, unnatural smile. She didn't say a word. Instead, she took a step toward me, and her shadow seemed to grow, stretching across the room to swallow the walls. Then she lunged. I don't remember running, only that I found myself outside, gasping for air. The house was silent again, but something had changed. As I backed away, I saw her silhouette in the upstairs window. She was watching me, unmoving. The whispers never stopped after that night. Even miles away from Elm Lane, I'd hear them in the dead of night, soft and inviting, just outside my window. I don't know what she wanted, or why she let me leave, but part of me feels like I didn't escape her at all. I had just moved to a new city when I stumbled upon something impossible. One afternoon, I was walking home from work when I passed a small, old-looking school tucked between two buildings. It wasn't big, just a single-story, brick structure with a rusted chain-link fence around it. A faded sign read, Crestwood Elementary. The strange part? There was no record of a school there. I asked my landlord about it that evening, and he looked at me like I had 3 heads. "There's no school there," he said flatly. "There's never been." Confused, I walked past the spot again the next morning, and sure enough, it was still there. A group of kids played in the small playground outside, their laughter faint in the crisp morning air. I saw teachers, their long shadows stretching over the cracked pavement, but something felt wrong. None of the kids had backpacks. They all wore identical gray uniforms. The teachers stood in an odd formation, not moving or speaking. I should have kept walking. Instead, I decided to go inside. When I pushed open the door, a heavy silence swallowed me. Inside, the halls were lined with rotting lockers and crumbling tiles. The classrooms were filled with desks, but there were no lights, only the pale glow of daylight struggling through dirty windows. Then a soft whisper drifted through the air, Why did you come back? I turned to see a woman standing in the hallway. Her face was pale, her eyes deep and hollow. Her lips barely moved when she spoke. You don't belong here, she whispered. A door down the hall slowly creaked open, and from inside small figures emerged, children standing unnaturally still, their wide, unblinking eyes locked onto me. My breath caught as one stepped forward. Its lips twisted into a gruesome smile. You were our favorite teacher, the girl said softly. I ran, I didn't look back. The school was gone the next day, just a plain stretch of sidewalk, like it had never been there. But sometimes when I pass that street, I hear children laughing, and I swear I can hear my name being whispered on the wind. I live alone, at least I thought I did. About a month ago, I started waking up feeling strangely uneasy, as if someone had been in my room. At first I shrugged it off as paranoia, but then weird things started happening. I would find my bedroom door slightly open in the mornings, even though I was sure I had shut it. My closet door would creak at night when there was no wind. Then came the worst part. One night my phone buzzed at 3:42 a.m. It was a text from an unknown number. Do you know how peaceful you look when you sleep? I sat up instantly, heart racing. I checked the front door, locked the windows secure, but then my phone buzzed again. Don't check the closet. The air turned cold. My closet door was open by an inch. I stared at the darkness inside, my hands trembling. I grabbed my lamp and hurled it at the closet. It crashed against the floor, and in the dim light, I saw movement inside, a shifting shadow. I ran. I don't even remember unlocking the door, just sprinting out into the night, gasping for air. The police found nothing inside, but they did find something under my bed. A single note with scrawled handwriting. You almost saw me. I don't sleep in that house anymore. But sometimes I wake up to unknown texts. He's still watching. I never believed in ghosts. Not until I moved into my new apartment. It was a charming little place tucked away in an old building downtown. The rent was cheap and the landlord seemed eager to get me in. I should have known something was off. The first night, I heard it. A faint whisper like someone was talking just out of earshot. I brushed it off as the wind or maybe the neighbors. But it kept happening. Every night around 3 a.m., the whispers would start. They weren't loud, but they were clear enough to make out a few words. Get out. I tried to ignore it. I even recorded the sounds to prove to myself it was nothing. But when I played the recording back, the whispers were gone. All I heard was static. That's when I started noticing other things. Cold spots in the hallway, shadows moving in the corner of my eye, and the feeling of being watched. One night, I decided to confront it. I stayed up, waiting for the whispers to start. When they did, I followed the sound to the living room wall. I pressed my ear against it and froze. The whispers weren't coming from the other side of the wall. They were coming from inside it. I called the landlord the next day, demanding an explanation. He hesitated before finally telling me the truth. Years ago, a woman had lived in the apartment. She disappeared one night and no one ever found her. The police searched the building but found nothing. The landlord lowered his voice and said, "They never checked the walls." I moved out the next day, but sometimes late at night I still hear the whispers. And I wonder if she's still there, trapped in the walls, begging for someone to find her. I've always been fascinated by old technology. There's something mysterious about it, like it holds secrets from a time long forgotten. That's why I couldn't resist when I found the vintage TV at the flea market. It was a bulky, wood-paneled set from the 1950s with a cracked screen and a faint smell of dust and mildew. The seller warned me it was special, but I didn't think much of it. I just thought it would make a cool decoration for my apartment. I brought it home and set it up in my living room. At first it didn't work, just a blank screen and a faint hum when I turned it on. But then, late one night, I woke up to the sound of static. The TV was on, its screen flickering with grainy black and white noise. I grabbed the remote and tried to turn it off, but nothing happened. The static grew louder, almost deafening, and then it stopped. The screen went dark for a moment before an image appeared. It was a room I recognized. It was my living room, but everything was slightly off. The furniture was arranged differently and the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper. In the corner of the screen I saw a figure. It was sitting in my armchair, its back to the camera. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure slowly turned its head and I saw its face. It was me, but it wasn't me. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile. It stared directly into the camera as if it could see me watching. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, and the screen went black. The TV turned off on its own. I told myself it was just a dream, a trick of my tired mind. But the next night, it happened again. The TV turned on by itself, and the static filled the room. This time the image was different. It was my bedroom, and the figure was lying in my bed. its hollow eyes staring at the ceiling. I could hear faint whispers coming from the TV, but I couldn't make out the words. I unplugged the TV and covered it with a blanket, but it didn't matter. The next night, it turned on again. The image was my kitchen, and the figure was standing at the counter, holding a knife. It turned to the camera and smiled, its mouth stretching too wide. The whispers grew louder, and this time I could understand them. "Let me out." I tried to get rid of the TV. I took it to the dump, but it showed up back in my living room the next day. I smashed it with a hammer, but the pieces reassembled themselves overnight. I even called a priest, but he refused to help, saying it was beyond his power. Now, the TV is always on. The figure is always there, watching me, mimicking my every move. Sometimes it's in my living room, sometimes it's in my bedroom or kitchen, but it's always watching, always waiting, and the whispers never stop. Last night, I saw something new. The figure stepped out of the TV. It's standing in my living room right now, smiling that grotesque smile. I don't know what it wants, but I can feel it getting closer, and I don't think I can stop it. If you're reading this, don't buy the TV, don't bring it into your home. And if you hear the static in the night, run, because once it finds you, there's no escape. I moved into my new apartment last month. It's a small, cozy place in a quiet building on the edge of town. The rent was cheap and the landlord seemed nice enough. But there was one thing that bothered me from the start: my neighbor. I never saw them, but I could hear them. Every night around midnight, I'd hear faint noises through the wall. It wasn't anything loud or disruptive, just the sound of footsteps, the creak of a chair, or the occasional tap 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 like someone typing on a keyboard. At first I thought it was just normal apartment noise, but then I noticed something strange. The noises always stopped the moment I made a sound. If I coughed, the footsteps would freeze. If I turned on the TV, the typing would stop. It was as if my neighbor was listening to me, waiting for me to make a move. I tried to brush it off, but the silence that followed my every sound was unnerving. One night I decided to introduce myself. I figured it would be better to meet my neighbor than to keep imagining the worst. I knocked on their door, but there was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and the door creaked open. It wasn't locked. The apartment was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no decorations, no signs of life. The walls were bare, and the floors were covered in a thick layer of dust. It looked like no one had lived there for years, but I could still hear the noises every night. I asked the landlord about it, and he gave me a strange look. "That apartment's been vacant for over a decade," he said. "No one's lived there since the previous tenant disappeared." I didn't know what to say. I went back to my apartment and tried to forget about it, but the noises kept coming, and they were getting louder. The footsteps sounded closer, like they were right on the other side of the wall. The typing became more frantic, like someone was trying to send a message. And then, one night, I heard something new. A voice. It was faint, almost a whisper, but I could make out the words, "Can you hear me?" I froze. The voice was coming from the wall. I pressed my ear against it and listened. The voice spoke again, louder this time. "I know you can hear me." I stumbled back, my heart racing. The voice grew louder, more desperate. "Help me, please, I'm trapped." I didn't know what to do. I called the police, but they didn't find anything. They said the apartment was empty, just like I had seen, but I could still hear the voice every night begging for help. Last night, I decided to confront it. I knocked on the wall and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice answered immediately. "I'm your neighbor. I've always been your neighbor." I don't know what to do. The voice is getting louder, more insistent. It's not just coming from the wall anymore, it's in my apartment, in my head. I can't sleep, I can't think, I can't escape it. And now, I'm starting to hear other voices. They're faint, but they're there. Whispering from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, they're all saying the same thing. "Help us, we're trapped." I don't know how much longer I can take this, but I do know one thing: I'm not alone in this apartment, and I don't think I ever was.